to the Industry Forum 2015. It's my great pleasure to welcome you and ask you to please come forward and take your seats. We're just about ready to start the excitement with the 6x10. And if any of you want to move as far forward as you can, come on in, because people will be coming in during the event, we know, and filling up the back seats. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This is our 7th year of producing the Industry Forum with the Portland CSI, Construction Specifications Institute, where we bring all the parties together. And so this evening you'll have an opportunity to meet and enjoy a conversation with architects, with contractors, with owners, with subcontractors, with many material suppliers of very high quality products that you utilize in all your projects, and get a chance to experience the expertise of each individual that's come to this event this evening. And so as you come forward, we will hear a little introduction of what we're doing from the master of the 6x10, the gentleman that puts this event together and coordinates all of our exciting and interesting speakers for the evening. Please let me welcome from Henneberry Eddy Architects, Alexander Lungershausen. Hey, Alexander. Thanks.
Thank you all for coming. First off, I would like to thank our platinum sponsors and all our sponsors actually for making this possible. Our platinum sponsors are Interface Engineering, Dearmore, Todd Construction, View, Interior Technology, Bluebeam, and Ideate. And once the 6x10 is over, we have 90 minutes to meet with everybody and communicate about the wonderful products that they're bringing to us tonight. So now to the 6x10. Welcome to the first part of our program, the 6x10 speakers. We have a really cool lineup today, which as always represents some of our amazing local talent, but also speaks to the variety of active participants in our community, which the Portland CSI is trying to get together in this room tonight. Please help me welcome our first speaker, Nada. Nada Mani is a Master of Architecture candidate at Portland State University. She is also working towards completing a graduate certificate in public interest design offered through the School of Architecture, the only one in this country. Nada was born in Amman, Jordan, to a family of 2 faiths and 2 nationalities. Growing up in an area of the world where cultural and religious divides run deep, Nada has experienced life on both sides. She has always been interested in the intersection of architecture and politics, and in design that will empower people both socially and politically. Please help me welcome Nada.
Thank you. I will be presenting my thesis project, Refugee Camp to City, from Reactive to Resilient. How can architecture transform a refugee camp into a child-friendly city that is designed around existing social networks? There are 15.2 million refugees in the world today. The UN has designed a system with the aim for refugees to pick one of 3 options as a permanent solution: either voluntary repatriation, local integration, or resettlement. Local integration is often the case, which puts a lot of pressure on already developing countries with their own existing political and economic instabilities. This results in static socioeconomic camps on margins of countries. Despite refugee camps being designed to suppress grassroots urbanism through their temporary nature, refugees have transformed some camps into informal cities with neighborhoods and a growing economy. The refugees seek normalcy even in the worst conditions. I find many problems with the lack of growth and the continued support for so many years. My vision is to create spaces that respond to existing social networks inside established refugee camps. Traditionally, emergency relief is reactionary and temporary. The goal is to challenge this notion and to begin to respond with long-term resilient solutions. The Syrian Civil War began in the early spring of 2011 as part of the Arab Spring protests in the Middle East. The war resulted in 2 million Syrian refugees. They seek asylum in many countries, but the top 3 are Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey. To deal with the influx of 490,000 refugees into Jordan, the Jordanian government and the UN built the Zaatari refugee camp, 12 kilometers from the Jordan-Syria border. The Zaatari camp opened in June of 2012. Currently, there are 85,000 refugees living in it, when the capacity is 60,000. The flow of Syrians into Jordan reaches up to 4,000 refugees per day. The camp has many problems, such as insufficient food, poor infrastructure, most of which is composed of tents and prefabricated housing units, restrictions to free speech, high rates of violence, rape, prostitution, and drug dealing. Despite the many problems that exist in the camp, the reason why I find myself attracted to it is the commercial district the refugees have created along the primary streets of the camp. They refer to it as the Champs-Élysées. They manipulate the prefabricated housing units, which they refer to as caravans, and transform them into shops. There are about 600 restaurants and 3,000 shops. These businesses are more than just a way to make money. They are an attempt by refugees to fight for a better future, to find a way to occupy their days, and to feel part of a community. During this past September, I visited the camp in Jordan. The aim was to do some field work along the intersection. I was able to study the site and group the caravan modifications into 9 different typologies. During my visit, I realized that the Champs-Élysées was male adult dominated. I knew then that I wanted to design for the children of the camp, with a focus on the needs of female children, as well as their mothers. The design will transform the street to symbolize a future for all refugees and not just adults. My observations of the everyday inside the camp led me to want to use specific interventions along the Champs-Élysées as a module that would spread over other safe streets in other neighborhoods. Given the sociocultural nature of Syrian cities and the multi-public layers, I wanted to design spaces of interaction and customization between publicness and privateness. The organic nature of the growth is the reason I picked this site, but it does not include children and women. Female children are at the highest risk in the camp. Only 42% attend school, and 46% are entering in arranged marriages before the age of 18. It was 13% in pre-war Syria. Parents fear for their daughter's safety. The result is the child spending all her time first in her parents' caravan and then her husband's. The youth are labeled the lost generation because of the decline in their education and their uncertain future. The module will include child spaces, which I will refer to as nadis. Although poorly designed, the camp already has spaces to house the various programs that engage children, but they only meet the immediate needs, such as safety and protection. My design aims to not only meet those short-term goals, but to also address and question existing social norms that promote inequality. I will take you on a journey to see the phasing of architecture transform a refugee camp into child-friendly cities. The module will be a permanent element designed within this camp of temporary infrastructure. To understand not only how to design for the Syrians, but also to design permanent within temporary, I began an investigation into understanding the physical in pre-war Syria through the lens of the social, and interpreting how the relationships between the public, private, and the in-between would appear in the camp. The module will also create opportunities to ease the tension between the Syrians and Jordanians. It will become a landmark by being permanent and through visual hierarchy. This is most important for the parents of the children using the Nadi spaces because it makes them feel safer about sending their children to these spaces. It is also located as a starting point on one of the busiest streets along one of the safest intersections in the camp. Raising the structures also allows temporary caravans to be moved around underneath and the permanent to not be a burden. Studying the courtyard housing and understanding the various spaces created and why they were created aided me at looking at the street as a courtyard, and thus creating spaces for everyone. The layers that traditionally exist in the Syrian courtyard are fundamentally created for a woman's privacy, thus giving her public space in her own home. I did not just mimic that, but I learned from it and translated it according to the needs of the refugees. In a single module, the following spaces exist. The existing shops highlighted in gray, the dwelling units highlighted in pink, the women's public space highlighted in blue, the nadi highlighted in red, the circulation highlighted in orange, the family space highlighted in green, and the business's interaction and customization space highlighted in light gray. When multiple of these modules are put together along a street, they become a courtyard. Next, I started investigating what the nadi could be within that module. I decided to use action words to begin to inform these spaces. Examples of action words include sitting, napping, chatting, climbing, eating, and jumping. There are 16 action words. For each one of these action words, I went through the process of first collaging to reach an atmospheric understanding, and then model making to reach spatial awareness. Then I translated them into section perspectives. Going back to the module, you can see I ended up with 23 horizontal and vertical screens. I picked 3 of these screens to develop further. The first screen is the one separating the nadi from the public. I also used action words to design this screen, and so there are 16 different options for this one screen. As I move through these elevations, you will see 4 of them: napping, drawing, crying, and chatting. The idea is that the refugees can pick and choose which space they want with which screen. The result is 2 spaces. The first is the interior space derived from the action word, and the second is the interstitial space between the screen and that interior space. The second screen is the one on top of the nadi space. I use this as an opportunity to ease the tension between the Jordanians and Syrians over shared resources by adding solar panels. The third screen is the one in front of the shops and restaurants, the adult screen. They allow the owners to market their business through signage, customize their storefront using the interstitial space, and allows access to each business, which is reminiscent of the souk in pre-war Syria. The Syrian refugees, like many other political refugees, are victims that have fled an oppressive government for a chance at a better life. Instead, they are imprisoned within barbed wires in a camp on a margin of a country 12 kilometers from their home. They are now in an environment where there is more oppression, where children have no futures and women have no value. Simply put, having livable cities instead of refugee camps does not diminish a refugee's right to return, and it should not be used as an excuse anymore. So the question that I raise is whether as human beings we should be satisfied with these poor living conditions, and if not, then as architects, what can we do about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Nada. That was amazingly informative. It's really great. Thank you for opening our eyes how the life of children can be improved upon through design in this very difficult situation. So much of what we do depends on communicating our discussions and ideas to all people especially who are not familiar with graphics and design and architecture. The electronic community has greatly improved our tools, especially in the last 15 years. And I'm very excited to introduce you to our next speaker, who has been in the forefront of that development. For the past 22 years, Lynn Allen has written a column for Catalyst magazine called Circles and Lines, and is the voice behind the popular Catalyst videos. Lynn has taught at the corporate and collegiate level for 13 years before joining Autodesk, and will now be introducing us to the up-and-coming industry trends in the work of design and the cloud. Lynn also bakes a really, really great blackberry pie, so please help me welcome Lynn.
Thank you. And somehow it seems so unimportant compared to reinventing refugee camps. My goodness. So, well, thank you so much for the invitation. I learned to make a blackberry pie actually here in Oregon. I went to high school in Dayton, Oregon, a small town outside of McMinnville. And ironically, in the last year, both of my grown children have moved to Portland, so maybe you will see more of me after all. So I am not going to be talking about something as amazing as that. You have an amazing future in front of you, young lady, I can tell. And I was very touched. I'm going to be talking about BIM, and I'm going to talk about the cloud. And we hear so much about the cloud, right? We hear about the Apple cloud, we hear about Amazon cloud, we hear cloud, 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 cloud. And clouds are actually, the whole concept is a little bit confusing. I mean, let's face it, we have point clouds, we have revision clouds, we have those white fluffy clouds, and then now we have all this software that runs on the cloud. And some of you might remember the old Joni Mitchell song. Kind of made me think of it as cloud delusions. I recall, I really don't know clouds at all. So about 3 years, Autodesk said, Lynn, you're going to go out and you're going to talk all about this cloud technology, because Autodesk believes that the future of design is going to be so much brighter with this cloud technology. So I dug into it. I said, what does the cloud really mean? What's it all about? What is it going to offer everybody? And the first question that came to my mind, I don't know about yours, but have you ever wondered why we call it the cloud? I mean, why don't we call it the sun or the moon or the carpet or whatever the situation is? And I can tell you that in 3 years that I've been presenting about the cloud, nobody has ever known the answer. So now, if you are ever on cloud trivia, you will know the answer, all right, or cloud Jeopardy, whatever. So let me tell you why we call it the cloud. And you're going to have to bear with me a minute or two while we get to that point. We call it the cloud because of this gentleman, John McCarthy, who was a Stanford professor. He passed away a few years ago at the age of 85. But back in the year 1961, he said that someday computation would be organized in the same way as a public utility. And you're still going, well, what does that have to do with the cloud? So please hold. So he believed that someday we would access our software just like we do our utilities. Like we plug in if we want to access our electricity, we unplug if we don't want to access our electricity, and we do it across a network. And you're still like, why is it called the cloud? Please hold. So he specifically referred to the telephone industry and the telephone network. And in the early days of the telephone industry, that network was called the cloud. There, now you know, all right? I'll take clouds for 500. So anyway, so that's why, and for those of you, just a little bit of trivia, for those of you who've ever used AutoCAD, this gentleman was the father of artificial intelligence, and he wrote the programming language Lisp. So there's also a little connection there for you. And some of you might remember the very first game, chess game, that you could play against the computer. He wrote that as well. So he was very, very famous in his day and throughout his lifetime. Brilliant man. So there are about 3 different reasons that I was able to come up with why we would want to use the cloud in design. The first one is the ability to store your data and access it from anywhere. That's that whole mobile aspect of the cloud. The ability to collaborate with people all over the world with your designs. And the last one, which we're not going to have a chance to get to today, but also very, very important, the ability, the computing power that we have of the cloud. Being able to access those 60 million servers with an amazing amount of power and no longer being restricted to the computer that your boss decided that you were worthy of. Being able to do amazing things like analysis and simulation and high-powered renderings and things like that. All right, let's start with mobile. So I think we all kind of get the whole mobile aspect. We've all used the mobile aspect in one way or another. And I'm sure many of you out there have tablets. So there's a belief that in the future that we will be using tablets for our design. And that the tablet today has about the same computing power as our workstations did 10 years ago. And I don't think any of us doubt that our tablets are going to get stronger and faster and more robust and probably even smaller if possible. In fact, if any of you have an iPhone 5 or higher, you have more technology than they did in 1969, than NASA had when they put somebody on the moon. That's pretty amazing. If you take a look at future generations, if you take a look at tablets and mobile tools like phones. You'll see that the next generation doesn't even think anything of it. It's second nature to them. Here you see a video of a young girl who's a baby under the age of 1. Tablet, second nature to her. The whole magazine thing, she's really not getting it at all. I don't think any of us doubt that the next generation of designers are going to expect to be using things like tablets and mobile cloud applications. I kind of want to get to the next one because it's my favorite part. Let's see. With 10 minutes, you know. This is where she thinks maybe her finger is broken. Nope, it still works. Obviously the magazine is the problem. So at Autodesk, we have quite a few mobile apps, and one of them for the construction industry allows us to take all that information that usually ends up in the office or in the trailer. 90% of all the information and technology stays out there and doesn't make it to the field. And we have an application called BIM 360 Field that allows you to get that very important information out to the construction site where it's really needed. In this example, this gentleman went in and took a look at a pump that had been installed. He was able to zoom in on the barcode, get the information on the pump. He was able to see if there were any issues with it, open the model, see if it was installed correctly, and make comments himself if he wanted to. So let's jump to collaboration. So some of you, if you have Autodesk products, may be familiar with A360. Some of you may have even opened an A360 account. Since I don't want to be too salesy, you should know that anybody can open an A360 account. It doesn't cost you any money. Everybody gets 5 gigabytes for free, 25 gigabytes if you have an Autodesk product and happen to be on subscription. And if you do have an Autodesk product, in the last few releases, you know that A360 is built right into the products. At the very least, lowest common denominator, it is an awesome backup system. You can set it up so that whenever you save your designs, it automatically saves your designs not only to where you normally would, maybe the network drive, maybe your local computer, but it will also save it to your A360 account. But A360 is much more than that. It is an awesome project controlling system. It's great at sharing technology, and this model that you're looking at is a Revit model, and it's 1.5 terabytes in size. A360 doesn't just read Autodesk files, it reads over 50 different file types, and if you've ever needed to share your model with somebody who doesn't have an Autodesk product, you can appreciate how great this would be and how easy it would be to use it. Once again, it doesn't cost any money. And this particular model was done by the Beck Group. And you'll see as it's spinning, there's some degradation, but it looks pretty darn good when it stops. In addition to that, it's not unusual for you to want to be able to get some of the data out of your model. And A360 also doesn't allow you just to view it, but to also get key information out of it. And we recently introduced collaboration for Revit, for those of you who use Revit software. So we're kind of used to the BIM manager keeping the Revit model somewhere on a local server, and everybody has to have access to this server. So Revit for collaboration allows you to put the Revit model up in the cloud, and anybody who has an internet connection can access the model. Of course, you still have control over who can look at it, who can edit it, and so on and so forth. But one of my very good friends who works for Stantec, who has been beta testing it, swears to me it's a game changer. It's made all the difference in their lives at Stantec. So it's something for you to look at. And then the last one of the cloud apps I'll talk about is BIM 360 Glue. So you're probably working with people, maybe you have an Autodesk product, maybe you don't, maybe you're working with somebody who has Autodesk products, maybe they have other products. But at some point in time, you have to put them all together. So BIM 360 Glue, once again, supports over 50 different file types and allows you to put all those models together so that you can do coordination and, very importantly, do that clash detection. So that different organizations can post to the model, they can check for clashes themselves, and instead of everybody having to wait for the clash party, which we're all, I'm sure, very familiar with. So that definitely shortens the cycle. So I know many of you probably work for organizations that haven't quite embraced the cloud yet, or maybe you work for government organizations that haven't quite embraced it. And I recently heard a gentleman who was Actually works for a competing company, but I love this statement so much, and I have a lot of respect for him. And this is so true. Your company may have already embraced the cloud, or they may have rejected the cloud, but I absolutely promise you that every single one of your companies in some way is using the cloud. And I've seen more and more companies come on board when they realize the advantages to it. So I want to thank you for your time, and I'll be around later if you have any comments or want to talk with me more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for joining us tonight. Lynn speaks to this topic all over the country, and we were really lucky to have her join us at this event tonight. And I can't wait to access all the software that I would like to access from the cloud in my home for free, but I guess that's probably the next step. So just really quickly to mention, Cherise is sitting back there in the booth. She is tweeting everything we do and show right now, so if you want to join us, the address is #IFPDXCSI, and if you want to join the tweet discussions, please feel free to do so. I met Nancy 5 years ago at the Oregon Design Conference and was immediately taken how the tactility of her folded shapes create interest and are at the same time approachable. Nancy Cheng has taught sustainable architecture design and digital methods at the University of Oregon since 1996. And she has been the director of the Portland, Oregon program from 2009 to 2013. She researches how tools and approaches shape the design process, focusing on digital tools as a source of innovation and cultural change. She examines how shading devices with undulating surfaces can create dynamic visual interest while blocking the sun's heat and glare. Last year, she gave lectures and workshops in China, Germany, Australia, and India, and worked with RMIT University's Spatial Information Architecture Lab in Melbourne, that's quite the mouthful, but I got it, on developing methods for understanding the cooling potential of folding surface structures. Please help me welcome Nancy.
Thank you very much, Alexander. I really appreciate Jody, Shreese, and all the CSI people who put together this magnificent schmooze fest. So let's see if we can make this go. So I'm going to tell you about my journey. I'm calling it Beyond Skin Deep because it's a little bit about trying to understand what is beauty. When I was 16, I sort of thought, what is my major going to be? And I thought, oh, I just want to create beauty in this world. Since then, the definition of what is beauty has grown from the visual field to things like efficiency or kindness, connection of communities, seeing the growth of a student's mind. All those kinds of things to me are beautiful. Today I'm going to talk about how I've grown a small project from a kind of crafty thing to a way to look at how we can have technology and analysis in design. So how many people here like to fold paper and do origami? Has anybody like that? I just find the blank sheet of paper something really interesting. The designers have this wonderful possibility of taking something very banal and simple and turning it into something wonderful, from nothing creating something. So I think it's a great thing that we can just make something like a single slit and curve folds and see what forms emerge. I was inspired by Paul Jackson and many other origami fanatics to try this myself. He did a one-fold experiment, a single fold with a piece of paper. What could you create with that? And so I kind of went OCD on it, I guess. So what you see here is what happens when you take a piece of paper and you cut it and you put some clasps, these little hooks that either go crossing horizontally or vertically. So on the left, what you see is what happens when it's like a curtain. It's just pinched in one direction. On the right, you see this kind of saddle shape emerges. So I played with those things, trying to see how you could adjust the perimeter shape, make these patterns using tessellation patterns, and maybe even remove some materials to get a purer form. So it was an exercise for me of free exploration to experiment with how can I use the physical qualities of paper with the digital tessellation patterns. And on the right, what you see is what happens when the clasp goes from a crossing to a Y shape. There's a little snowflake there I sent as a Christmas gift, and my husband said, hey, nobody else is going to be able to make those hooks come together. So I think we stuck with a two-directional cross. What you see here is a simple accordion pleat that has some of these little tucks and folds put into it. On the left, there's the colored petals, so the color is applied to the back. And on the right, you see what happens when a very bright light is shown on it. So if the sun goes away, it's white. If the sun is very intense and hits it at the right angle, you get this emergent light. So it's this kind of discovery of the phenomena that I'm really interested in. And I had this great opportunity to travel and visit friends who teach at different schools. And so we looked at things like, how do you work with this color in an architectural setting? We made these simple box models and moved a Klieg light around, a spotlight around. You see that little piece of orange paper. We thought, what would happen if the ground was a different color? Orange for fall leaves, white for winter, and green for spring. So these are some of the images that came from that workshop. What you're also seeing is that sweet spot of having something very crisp because it's close, and something very faint and mysterious because it's far away. So what I'm trying to do with the students is lead them in really examining carefully these happy accidents that happen when you are working with light and shadow, and you're looking carefully at the material effects. The next step was to try to be more of a scientist, and so I want to introduce my view of the design method. What you're seeing here is this triangle of just, you imagine something in your head. You have this mental map of what it is. Then, to understand it, you have to put it into the world by creating something, whether it's a cardboard model, a little sketch, or some digital kind of 3D massing, and then you look at it and try to judge it. Traditionally, architects in this assessing process or perceiving process are like, yeah, that kind of looks cool, that'll do it, right? But what we need to do is go and be a little bit more critical. We now have a whole suite of tools, so it was great that Lynn was here to set it up. It's like she put the ball right next to the basket, and I'm showing you a few applications. I think there's this rich kind of garden of different tools that we have, and we have to find the right tool at the right time, as my colleague Ellen Doe says. So how can we use the possibilities to get the most creativity and have the best results? Those digital tools are great at helping us understand complexity and make many variations. So what you see on the left came from after I did a little hand folding. I had a very boring time with my mother-in-law in West Virginia, and it was just a great chance to actually spend a lot of time examining this folding thing and figure out the real geometry of it. So no offense to anybody from West Virginia, but we were in the backwaters. And then from that, I was able to get both a 2D pattern and this 3D simulation. So from one form, the parametric design allows you to see many, many variations and make judgments. Then when I was in Melbourne, I had this great opportunity to work with this lab where we had experts of the parametric design, the grasshopper tool, as well as a woman from Iran who was really interested in self-shading of folding. So what you see here is from one of the classes that we did together. There's a little small piece of that kind of folding motif you just saw and looking at how this heat is hitting that where it's shaded naturally, and then the whole. How does it work in a larger structure? So here is a class that I've been doing in Oregon. What you see here is Jesse Elliott created this. Oh, I have a timestamp on that. Jesse Elliott created this with the Ladybug climate simulator and solar analysis. What you're seeing on the little cone on the right-hand side, that's the sun. And you can see the path of the sun with those arcs. And then there's the little structure he created. And here you can see it. As the light moves, it has little leaves that move. It's a biomimicry kind of structure. The idea is that the kinetic structure could respond to the input that it's getting. When I was in Australia, we also had those students look at an existing building and try to understand the heat is hitting the east side and the west side. It was shaded on the north, which is equivalent to our south. So above the pictures of the heat that's hitting the building, blue is shaded, red is very hot, are some ideas of how to use that folding pattern to get shading where you need it. So for the east and west, it's vertical. For the north, it's horizontal. Then what that person did was he looked at what functionally you would need in order to have openings for views there was a major view down a major corridor. And then there was gallery on the bottom. And the result was that the team designed this wrapper, a shading structure, and on the left is the original set of folds with 3 different students' folds unified together through the accordion pleat and the interior of what it would look like. So, maybe a little bit too much shading for actually seeing through it every day, but it was a great demonstration that you can have at your desktop tools that can help you make something that has a beautiful form and also beautiful performance. The great thing about collaboration, as we were just saying, is that you can really extend what you can do. So here you see 2 students, Dan Sykes and Nicholas, led by Nicholas Williams and David Mendonca, created these wonderful diagrams of how could we put this together. So the idea of kind of rolling the seams. And then they tested out, could we use something resilient for hinges so that we might incorporate either rubber or some color with a kind of vinyl or plastic? Oh, that's my 10 minutes. Okay. And then here's the final of that construction showing how they created, the proof is in the pudding of how this comes together. So quickly, I'll go through. When we design, it's extremely complicated. So we need to take these little lenses. For my case, it was form, light, material, and movement. Each lens gets us to a certain bias in what it results in. So on the left, you see this curve form from doing visual studies. When you fold it, it has to be creased. And on the right is a simplified version for the grasshopper. When you work, you start at a small scale. You see those simple motifs. Then you build it up from the 2D to the 3D, and each scale informs the next with the practical consideration of the installation really pushing how you have to have pragmatic results. So when we scale up, this is when we need you who are there from the building industry to help us understand, because your best partner is the one who loves to do what you hate to do. And I tell my students, so this was in Wuhan in China, we put together this one. The proof is really in the pudding of what the material conveys to people when they see it, the emotional impact that you can create from the tactile and the visual kind of effects that you generate. Whether it's from a computer or not, the proof is in the built object. So I'd like to thank the people who helped me on this, and I wanted to tell you my partner Jane Burry will give a free talk on June 17th. So if you want to learn more about real-time data, please come to U of O at that time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nancy. I love this link between the simple shapes in your facility to develop what you find with all what high tech has to offer today. I think it's amazing. But I also love, and I'm really excited about this, to have an educator speak for the first time at our event. And there are a couple more professors out there, so please contact them. This is a shout out for you guys, creating the minds of the future. I think that's very exciting to have you here. Nancy's design studios also connect students to local community situations and examine how social interaction can be seeded amid natural and urban systems, which brings us to Kristen. Kristen Calhoun is a public art manager at the Regional Arts and Culture Council and has been managing public art projects in the Portland metro area and beyond for over 20 years, promoting collaboration among artists, architects, and the wonderful people who build everything. She loves the diversity of communities and the types of projects that are inherent in managing public art and art projects for our region, and has a passion for temporary experiential public art projects. Please help me welcome Kristen. Can we move back one presentation, please? It should be number 4.
Well, you didn't think that I could talk about public art in Portland without starting with Portlandia. Our Fair Lady of the City turns 30 this year. As I'm sure most of the people in this audience know, she was envisioned originally by the late Michael Graves as part of his infamous Portland building. After a long public presentation and selection process, the artist Raymond Caskey was selected to create Portlandia. Very few cities around the country can boast a public art piece that got such a huge welcome. And the artwork has even inspired other artists to create works like Amos Latier's Be Portlandia in our installation space in the Portland building, where you could be Portlandia, have your photograph taken, and then post it up on the wall. Portlandia came into existence because of the Percent for Art, and this year we celebrate 35 years of the Percent for Art in Portland. We started as 1%, and now we're up to 2%. Of the 2%, 63% of that is set aside for the acquisition of artwork, and the other 27% goes to the management, maintenance, registration, and public education that we do. And while I'm really proud of all the policies and wonkiness that we have, I'm not really going to talk about that today. You'll be relieved to know. So good citizens are the riches of a city. Some of you may recognize that as coming from the base of the Skidmore Fountain. And while not all selection panels include a trapeze, they do all include citizens, artists, project designers, community members, and representatives of the main user groups. In every case, the selection panel discusses what is the role of public art in this context. For the Gibbs Street pedestrian bridge elevator in the South Waterfront, artist Anna Valentina Murch created River Wrap to lead elevator riders down to the river wrapped in water. This was a project that, as you can imagine, went through all sorts of testing to make sure that the artist's methods also met all the safety specs of being in an elevator. For the Ed Benedict skate park, artist and skater Dan Garland created skatable artwork integrated into the park. Artist Dan Corson's Mercurial Sky brings video imagery drawn from nature into the video array and the canopy of Director Park, which is, as you know, an otherwise very hardscape park. For the Westmoreland Play area, the very limited percent for art budget went into artist Adam Kuby's time, lending his vision on how to sculpturally design and install the elements that became the play area. Here's a completed shot where they created log climbers, as you can see sort of in the background there, and a lot of these are using felled trees that came from other park sites. Our recent work on the Portland Streetcar Loop is an interesting case study. We decided to focus the art dollars on 3 locations, represented in the green circles there, and invited artists to express their interest. What could artist Jorge Pardo, who had created these fanciful installations, do with the task of creating a streetcar shelter? His answer was to create a rainy on the outside, sunny on the inside beacon for the stop at the Broadway-Weidler confluence. Now I thought you might enjoy a more in-depth look at how Annie Hahn and Daniel Mahalio, who are known as Lead Pencil Studios and U of O grads, what they did with the approaches for the Hawthorne and Morrison bridges. The selection panel was interested in their studies of spatial relationships and also their industrial bent. This was their very first take on what their idea for the site might be: 2 companion pieces that would render the same forms in positive and negative shapes. Inspired by both historic photos of the sites and structures that exist in the industrial neighborhood, they settled on the form of this building in red, a foundry that sat on the site at Hawthorne prior to the installation of the bridge ramps. Then came the modeling, something you're all familiar with, and the negotiating, the specifics. The site is owned by the county with easements by the city. Easy, right? So here was some site negotiating with city traffic engineers. All of these people in the photo represent different interests. So traffic engineers, folks from street lighting, ADA, pedestrian safety folks. And ultimately, we got to a buildable project. The artists rented a studio just blocks away from the Hawthorne site, built a false wall to get the precise plane that they wanted, and then built the piece backwards from the wall in 10-foot sections that they then hung together. And now I magically jump to the finished works. The work is called Inversion, plus minus. This is the plus side. From different angles. And then the minus side. As you can gather from where the leaps we made with this team, artistic growth is important, and the ability for a selection panel to look at an artist's previous works and then say, yes, we believe that they can make the leap. We believe that they're the right fit for this location. So in this case, artists whose work was very industrial and their interests were very aligned with the location. And let them take the leap to fabricating something larger than they had ever fabricated before. There are also smaller ways to express artistic growth, like these gates done by tattoo artist Joe Lerald for the new maintenance parks facility in East Portland. And as projects are developing, we are always looking for opportunities for smaller works, portable works that hang in different locations, like Ralph Puget's Summit. or larger paintings like Isaka Shamsuddin's Bilalian Odyssey about the Black pioneers of Portland. Finding large blank walls that aren't marked or scored or other things is definitely something that we're always looking for and always interested in working with architects and designers on. Also providing opportunities for artists to do temporary works, like this installation of Heidi Keith's Van Gogh Goes 3D, or Damian Gillies' Vanishing Perspective of downtown. And next to that is Peg Butler's People Blind, where users of the Portland building could go in and observe the people moving through much in the same way you would a bird blind. Another newish frontier for us is to have artists working in residence in municipal settings, like Kaya Sand and Garrick Imatani working in the City Archives and Records Center. Using surveillance files from the 60s and 70s and protests and activists, they created this interactive installation that has traveled around different locations. And they created poetry, this one long piece of poetry that you see here stamped into cards, where Kaya, who is a poet, collected sentences that began with the word she and then composed them into a new poem. In the end, it's about plays well with others, matching intents and talents with the hard work of getting it done. As public art managers, we play multiple roles. One of the biggest questions we ask, especially when things are challenging, is, are we speaking the same language? And I can tell you we're often not. So the big hurdle is how to get there. In the end, it's great work to bring art into the community, and to work together, we need curiosity, kindness, and stamina. So here's where you find me if you have any questions and want to talk about the conceptual underpinnings of what we do or the wonky details of getting it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. That was great. Just real quick, where we find everybody, all our presenters, there's a handout that is on the round tables out there. If you want to talk to some of them and you don't get in touch with them tonight, here's their contact address and a quick summary of their presentations. So please feel free to contact them later. Also, if you're not able, or if you're actually late to this presentation, there's Frank standing there behind the camera. Hi, Frank. Who is videotaping all of this and doing his amazing editing work, and so you can see everything that's happening tonight on YouTube as well. Let's take a step outside of our urban community to the Pacific coast, just 90 minutes away from here, and hear about improvement opportunities to public resiliency. Hannah Pempus is the project manager for the Portland Urban Research Project and her better block, Portland Volunteer, when she does not follow her other passion of playing basketball, which she has been doing for 20 years. She's here with Kelly Nolte, a recent graduate of the University of Oregon's architecture program. Kelly is invested in working towards community resiliency building. She is currently studying several projects that are architectural responses to disaster events. She's also an avid gardener and spends much of her free time in her community garden plot. Please help me welcome Hannah and Kelly.
Thank you for that introduction and having us here. So, we are located on the Cascadia subduction line, which ranges from about the Vancouver Island to the northern portion of California. It's about 620 miles long. And this is where the Juan del Fuego plate meets the North American plate. And these two plates, while they're coming together, cause a lot of pressure. And this pressure is usually released in an 8 or a 9 earthquake. And over the last 10,000 years, in the southern portion that we're located in, this pressure is released about, on estimate, you know, rough estimate, every 234 years. And the last time we experienced 8 or 9 in our area was January 26th of 1700. So it's been about 315 years. We're overdue. And what's not only potentially fatal about the fact that we're overdue for an 8 or 9 earthquake is the fact that it's located, this fault line's located so close to the coast that it's going to also cause a local tsunami, which will occur about 15 minutes after the shaking stops.
So recent seismic events that have occurred actually in the past 10 years give us some examples of the kind of damage that these kind of events can make. And so in 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami, which actually was a distant tsunami, which means an event happening about 620 miles off the coast. It was a magnitude 9.0, and it caused tremendous damage and affected many lives, and especially in India, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia, killing more than 230,000 people in 14 countries. And people were not very well prepared for this event. Recently in Nepal, we had a 7.8 and an 8.1 earthquake, and actually as of last night, another 7.3 earthquake, kind of halting some of the aid there. And this has caused a lot of loss of lives and damage to World Heritage sites, and injured many people. But what we're really going to experience is something like what happened in Japan, and that is a local tsunami. And that's occurring, well, in Japan's case, it was 43 miles off the coast, and it was a magnitude 9.0, and it caused staggering wave heights and came inland about 6 miles, and causing a tremendous loss of lives and property. But Japan's preparedness actually probably saved a lot of lives, and they've been used to preparing for events like this for a long time and have invested in resources and ways to withstand those kinds of things. And you know, the word tsunami is Japanese for harbor wave. So what we're hoping is that we can learn from these events and protect our communities through being prepared like Japan, and hopefully save lives. So who are we? We are the Portland Urban Architecture Research Lab at the University of Oregon, and we were hired by the Oregon Office of Emergency Management to do some research for tsunami evacuation wayfinding on the Oregon coast. And last summer we held a community design charrette in Astoria, and we had stakeholders and people working on this kind of stuff come there and help us kind of create some new solutions and ideas for ways that we can improve the wayfinding system on the coast.
So why hire designers to help in the preparedness against a tsunami? Well, designers, as most of us know, we have this kind of design knowledge where we can take great, big, huge, complicated, convoluted problems, and we can break them down into very straightforward problems that can then have a bunch of solutions generated for it. Not saying that you can generate a right or a wrong solution for everything, but using designers, we're able to find many, many solutions through the creative process that might work to help in the long run for really complex problems. And at Pearl, we take this a step further. So we take this design knowledge and we apply it to a pattern language. And a pattern language is basically a recipe book of all of these ideas that can be applied in multiple different locations in a very clear and effective way. So with our pattern language, what we did was we broke it into a before a tsunami event, during, and after an event. And we came up with a bunch of different patterns that can then be applied and can link together to make a really robust wayfinding chain.
So what is wayfinding? Wayfinding is the process of getting people from point A to point B using a motivated path and route and activity. But what we're really dealing with here is tsunami evacuation wayfinding, which adds a whole other element of stress and uncertainty and things that we can't always prepare for. So we believe that by creating a chain and organizing in such a way that hopefully we can improve the fact that we'll be able to get people from where they are to safety.
And so a Wayfinding Chains, the main goal of that is to establish both physical and mental mapping. So that's knowing where you are before an event, and then what our job is with creating this chain is to educate people so they form this map, and then during an event they can have something that they can grasp onto when their topography and everything has changed around them, when they're in a panic, and something that'll aid them to then find their way to safety and also aid them after the event in the potential hardship that could happen, since this earthquake will affect everyone along the Pacific range. It's likely that these coastal communities will be some of the last people to receive aid. But what makes good wayfinding? I'm sure you're wondering.
Well, Kaylee, I can tell you what it doesn't look like. So there are some great things being done on the coast right now, but in certain areas there are some issues. So we have places where there's signs where you get to this post and it's telling you to go in 2 different directions. Well, in an event, I want to know what's the quickest, most effective route to safety. I don't want 2 options, I want 1. Or if there's 2 options, there should maybe be distances with those options. There needs to be more, and there needs to be a direct route. And then we've got a lot of sign clutter going on, and the little tiny wave sign telling you you're in an inundation zone, it gets lost amongst all the other things at a very popular beach spot. And then while the other sign, it's the right message, we kind of want to make sure we're using consistent language and an appropriate tone throughout the coast. We want people to be informed and knowledgeable, but we don't want to scare tourists away.
So an example of what we've been applying in this pattern language is a wayfinding chain, and this is something that we consider good wayfinding because it is a robust system that has a lot of repetition in it. So before, during, and after the event, it's something that with the information, the mapping, you see those same things in the signage, and then you see those same things in the assembly and shelter, and that reinforces physical and cognitive mapping as well as placemaking.
So as Kaylee just mentioned, the chain, the before, during, and after, we believe that before is probably the most crucial part because it's really setting people up for that physical and cognitive mapping along the way, and starting to use those signs and symbols and the color blue and the wave. And we want to create awareness. We want places like this rendering at the beach, we want people to come up and be curious and want to learn more about the Cascadia fault line and being in an inundation zone. And then we really want to highlight the routes from those places. So we really need to bring more attention to learning about the dangers that are at these places that people are visiting and living.
And so education before is probably going to be the most effective way to save the most amount of lives in an event, but then during, there needs to be a robust system that will withstand all of the changes that occur during the earthquake and the 5 minutes of shaking that'll happen there, and then reinforce that education. And even if you haven't been educated, it will guide you like a breadcrumb trail to the next place. And this also involves multiple forms of signage, so not just signs on posts, but also lights in the ground and paint on the ground, which applies to after as well. You need to know when you've reached safety, and you need to also be able to know what happens when you've reached safety. How do you organize? What if the people that were in charge didn't make it? So using techniques of design to inform people and really clearly lay out, okay, well, this is your procedure, this is how you're going to make it through.
So while we just showed you some of the things that we've been doing for the wayfinding chain, there's other things to consider. One of those things is, what if you can't actually start the chain? You get stuck in a spot where you're stranded because a bridge has collapsed and you're blocked by rivers and you can't make it to high ground. Well, what about vertical evacuation and other ways to make it to safety? And then maybe that also includes pedestrian bridges that are reinforced, or spending some more money on the bridges that currently, as they stand, are probably going to fall down in an 8 or a 9 earthquake. And then there's other things happening along the Oregon coast that are really great, as we talked about before, being a very important part of the process. Some communities like Cannon Beach runs Beat the Wave Run, which has people running the routes and getting to know how they get from their home to safety, and things like that are really great. And we want to encourage those ideas and spread them around. We want other communities to know what other cities are doing. So if you want to learn more about our work, you can check out the Pearl website. There is our report from last summer, as well. At the end of this summer, there will be a report that we are doing for Seaside and Warrenton, and we are doing more specific project languages and applying some of these designs to places on the coast in those communities. And then the OEM website and Dogami have some great maps and things that you probably want to check out for learning more about that. And thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. The tsunami issue comes up every time we go with our daughters to the coast. So if you can start in Waldport, like these signs would really awesome. We always go there and it would really help us because we don't think it's very clear right now. However, before you can save communities, you have to create them. You probably noticed a strong correlation between public involvement and the fresh creative approaches in all of our presentations. That said, our last speaker will now bring this all home for us. I'm so excited that Jackie agreed to join us tonight. Jackie Sappington and her husband, Adam, opened their dream restaurant, The Country Cat, in April 2007, seamlessly blending their talents into a family-driven and community-focused eatery centered on American craft cooking, taking the farm-to-table concept to admirable heights. Jackie studied anthropology of food at the University of Oregon and then moved to Portland in 1995, upon which she worked in a whole bunch of restaurants. She then switched gears to pastry chef, learning about appreciating the preciseness and scientific aspect of baking. Jackie's on-the-job education proved time, dedication, and repetition were the keys to perfecting the craft. With a sole focus on pastries for over 10 years now, Jackie's approach is warm and patient, but meticulous and infused with love. In her spare time, she also finds time to train and run for marathons, which I think is amazing. So please help me welcome our last speaker, Jackie Sappington.
Thank you so much. I have to say I am so impressed with all the speakers, and I'm like, wow, why am I here? Because you guys are bringing so much important design and work to the community, and sitting here listening to everybody. I'm a baker. I work with my hands. My husband's a butcher, and we just like to eat. So, you know, our mantra is that we do what we love. The restaurant business is a lifestyle. It's not a job. And that's a tenet that we have taught our kids and that we have surrendered to with love, and through all the hard work. It's remembering first that we bake, we cook, and we bring people together. And so, you know, that kind of brings me to MFK Fisher, who is a notable food writer, that she says, you know, first we eat and then we do everything else. So with that, you know, we opened the Country Cat in 2007 in Montevilla, which is on the east side of Mount Tabor. It was, you know, we didn't know much about Montevilla when we chose this location. It was a sleepy little part of town. We're right on the corner of 80th and Stark. And, you know, this area of Mount Tabor was this tract of farmland. There wasn't much there. It was, you know, Mount Tabor kind of set it apart from the rest of burgeoning Portland. It was first named Mount Tabor Villa Addition. I think that was a mouthful. And so now it's been contracted to Montevilla. And it's kind of the same thing with, you know, when people aren't from Portland, they say Montevilla, just like Willamette. And so I was like, no, it should be Montevilla, but it's Montevilla. you know. So you look down the street of Stark, which used to be Baseline, and you get this sense of this old-time street. And so, you know, when Adam and I decided that we wanted to open a restaurant, being two crazy line cooks and chefs at the time, we're like, sure, let's open a restaurant. We know how to do this. You know, we met at Wildwood in '95. We fell in love over the stove. He became the, not on the stove, just over the stove. He became the chef of the restaurant, and he stayed at Wildwood for 11 years. And Corey Schreiber, who was the founder of Wildwood, was really the trailblazer here in Portland to bring farm to table and the whole farm to table concept here. And it's, you know, now it's almost cliche to say farm to table. It's, people know it, they know it, you know, we're so lucky here in Portland to have amazing product so close to us. Our seasons are amazing. And, you know, it's kind of like, if you're not cooking seasonally, it's more like, why not? So we left, well, Adam left Wildwood in 2006. I kind of hopped around. We had a couple kids. And so we decided, well, our kids are young enough, let's open a restaurant. I went back to work full time. He had our 1-year-old going through design meetings with our architect and the construction company. And when we happened upon the Dixon Drug Building, it was kind of this like, oh my gosh, this is an incredible spot. We looked at Montevilla, and we saw this sleepy little town. I kind of put these out of order. I'm not, like I said, I'm a baker, not PowerPoint. So I may, so we'll go back to that one. But it really had this old Main Street vibe. It's not modern buildings. It has lots of texture to the various facades, lots of awnings. What really spurned our interest was the refurbishing of the Academy Theater. And we saw this place as untapped. And when we saw the Dixon Drug Building, it had this Mosaic RX thing right on the side of the door. And it just, you walk in and it said post office, and then it said soda fountain. And it was a totally gutted space. It had been vacant for a while. But we were like, this is it. We felt this gut feeling about it. And what we felt was, this was a spot that had brought people together back in the day. And we want to take this spot and do that again, because this area is ready for it. We had Bipartisan on the corner, opposite corner. Yahala was across the street, or is across the street from us. Flying Pie's been there forever. And so we thought, you know, we can help bring this really sleepy little area to life, because as we found out about it, you know, young families were moving in. It's affordable housing, and it was affordable rent for the Dixon Drug. And Adam and I decided to do this on our own. You know, we don't have investors. It was like, it's what we could afford. So kind of going back to what Country Cat's about, is we wanted to take our fine dining experience and bring it to a family-friendly, casual atmosphere. Here we had a young family, and we still like to eat. We still like to have a nice glass of wine, and we want to be able to bring our kids there with not being, you know, without having to sit in the family section of the restaurant. And we knew that we weren't the only families that felt like that. So for us, the Country Cat was, take off the white tablecloths. Let's make it neighborhood, down home, friendly. Adam is a Missouri boy. He's from Jefferson City. He's a total grandma at heart. He wants to feed everybody. He welcomes you in. Are you hungry? Let's get you something to eat. Let's get you a drink. Let's turn Ray Charles up really loud, and let's have some fun. So that was really what our vision was with Country Cat. And a big part of that was making from scratch food. Everything is made in-house, and really hearkening back to our classic American heritage recipes. You know, you hear about the prosciuttos of Italy and the Serrano hands and the jamones from Spain, but there's so much amazing artistic food happening and has happened for centuries at this point in America. And so we really wanted to bring those to light and just put the love into what we do. So I'll go to the next one. So Adam is a self-taught butcher. And so what we have done with our menu is Adam started the whole animal butchery program at Wildwood while he was there. And what that means is that he brought in whole animals. It's a use everything, waste nothing approach. So we go through about a half cow a week. We get a whole pig, we get lamb. He breaks it down along with his assistants. The bones go into stock. The steaks are specials, and we grind our own meat for hamburgers. And it's really saying, you know what? You don't need to go and get box cuts for this. It's more cost effective. It's bringing the price point to the neighborhood where people can get really amazing local sourced meat, artfully prepared and mindfully prepared. Adam talks to our ranchers every week, multiple times a week, on the aging, the hanging. I mean, it's amazing. And then watching him when he breaks down an animal, granted I haven't been in an operating room, but he's so meticulous, but it's also this crazy workout. He's hugging the beef, and he's got his, he's got his saw, and it's this peaceful, artful experience that it's like, I wish our customers could really see what goes into our food to bring it to the table and to the plate. I get to do the sweet stuff. We do all of our bread, and we do all of our pastry in-house. We have a pretty extensive program. We actually just moved our pastry department 2 doors down from the restaurant because we just had grown out of the space. And so that allows us more time to do bread, to do our pies. I'm a total pie geek. But there's something that, I don't know for those of you that bake pies, I know one of our speakers does. When you see a pie come out of the oven, there's a warmth. Rather than the obvious visceral, it just makes you smile. And to feed that to your loved ones and to friends and family, it really brings people together. And that's what we do in Montevilla every day. So cooking at the Country Cat, we really do focus on simple seasonal ingredients. There aren't any tweezers in our kitchen. The tweezer food's great, has a place. We are very rustic, American, big, hearty portions. What we have done is we've reimagined and reinvented American classics. This is one of our brunch items, and it's smoked tomato soup with grilled cheese. It's just one of those things that's what you want to eat. We try not to fuss with our local product. When you get an amazing tomato out of the Willamette Valley or super crisp radishes, maybe sprinkle some salt on it, and that's all you need to do. So we always keep pushing forward. We want to make the best food possible. We always, we taste everything. We make sure everything is fresh. And that's part of what we try to bring to our customers when they come in. I remember when we opened, the day that we opened, and we saw the line of these people coming into our restaurant, and they were coming in together, and these families were coming in to sit down, and friends, and it was immediately this communal moment of wow, we've brought people together. And it's such one of the greatest joys of both of our lives to see people sitting in our restaurant having a great time. We're open for most of the major holidays. We close for Christmas, but we're open for Thanksgiving. We're open for Mother's Day. We're open for Father's Day. We're open for New Year's Day because it brings people together that want to sit and they want to eat, and not only are they hopefully feeding their soul with the company that they're keeping, but they're also feeding their bellies. So now Montevilla, 8 years later, we just celebrated our 8-year anniversary. It's a different place. There's still a little flavor here and again, seeing that we're kind of close to 82nd. But 82nd itself is changing, and it's not as like, ooh, 82nd. Maybe a little bit. We see families coming and spending the day in Montevilla. They'll hike up Mount Tabor. They'll go see a movie at the Academy. They'll go have a cocktail at Vintage. They'll come have dinner with us or brunch. And it's such a wonderful thing to see people coming together on this street. It really feels like a main street. We have very small vacancies now on the street. I think we have one spot across the street that's being leased, but we have over 11 restaurants on the street between 76th and 80th. We have probably 6 to 8 retail spaces, not to mention the Academy Theater. We have a farmer's market every Sunday in the summer. And you really get, you see people you see day in and day out. People come together to catch up. It's really been amazing to watch the change. And I think one of the biggest things for me was seeing one day on one of those real estate flyers, someone put our logo on there, close to Country Cat, as a selling point to move into the neighborhood. I was like, wow, it was an honor in a way to be on it, we have a great business association, and growth continues in the area. For the Country Cat for 2015, we keep growing as well to bring our communal, artistic, hands-on approach to our food. We just opened a location in PDX, and I don't know if you know of the national challenge, the national effort to bring elevated dining to airports across the country. We've been lucky enough to do that, to be a model of what is here and a welcoming factor of what's here in Portland. So we're bringing, and the amazing thing to that as well is we're still doing farm to table. Our ranchers are bringing us a lot more beef and a lot more pork and a lot more bacon to PDX. But it's been an amazing effort. We just opened 40 days ago. We've put Montevilla on the map. We've been fortunate enough to have a few TV appearances highlighting Country Cat and what we do in our butchery programs and our pastry programs. And we are releasing our cookbook, Heartlandia, that kind of sings true to Portlandia. It's highlighting our local bounty, and also putting together our heartland roots with Missouri and the kind of all together of why we moved out to Portland. That's being released September of this year. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for having such a diverse group of speakers. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for listening.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers. I think that was absolutely fantastic. These talks were incredibly inspiring, and it really shows that community can grow and be strengthened from within with just the right sparks. So now the program changes. Please join us for food and lots of conversations in the back of the room. We'll meet back here in about an hour, hour and a half for the keynote address by Shohei Shigematsu from OMA. And please have a great evening and most of all, have fun. Bye.
It's just finding that time, the reminder. I saw this coming up and was like, that's right, I have it here. Well, it seemed like the last few months I was either
they're like, wait a minute.
It's just finding that time. It's just finding that time, the reminder. I saw this coming up.